God is dead! Or God's is dead. Gods are dead? Gods are human? I don't know. I don't think Nietzsche was a critter. That's right, Critical Role just wrapped up a third campaign, and all signs are pointing towards big changes for their 10th year. I've been watching since the very beginning, and I have a lot of thoughts, so let's get into it. Like I said, I've literally been watching Critical Role since that first poorly mic'd session 10 years ago. I had been watching Felicia Day's solo streams for a while, and when she announced Geek and Sundry would start a Twitch channel, I was all in. It kind of became a daily ritual for me at the time to see what was on stream before I headed into work. Geek and Sundry introduced me to a lot of folks I still follow around the internet to this day, like Ify Oddaway and Erica Ishii, who do a lot of stuff with Dropout, Heroes Reforged, and of course, Critical Role. On Geek and Sundry, there were people playing Rocket League, Magic the Gathering, Hero Clicks, and all sorts of other stuff, but I was most excited when a Dungeons & Dragons show appeared on the schedule. I had only had a brief experience of being around folks playing D&D, and then promptly got in trouble with my very religious mother. And not religious dad who suddenly cared about black magic out of nowhere, as my parents had fallen for the satanic panic BS. So I was forbade from gambling with my immortal soul in my friend's basement or local hobby shop. But a sure way to get me interested in something is to tell me not to do it. How could I resist a new show on a Twitch channel I already watched as it broadcasts something I wasn't allowed to participate in as a kid? So I tuned in day one despite bad audio and other on-screen jitters, and I was hooked. You don't need another person telling you how good Critical Role is, but between the masterful DMing of Matthew Mercer and the obvious chemistry from the cast, well, most of the cast, it was hard not to get hooked on this seemingly new way to tell a story. But I was as shocked as anyone, cast included, with just how many people loved it. Suddenly, this thing I thought was only for the nerdiest of the dorks was huge. What a time to be alive! I tuned in each week without fail, at least when there wasn't a Marvel movie midnight premiere to get to. We really were living in a golden age of stuff that was extremely my shit. As time went on, Campaign 1 came to an emotional close. You could tell the actors had a deep connection to these characters, and letting go was hard and scary. And the same could be said for us in the audience. Latching on to Vox Machina was easy. They were archetypal characters, your traditional good guy heroes, but they ran a kind of deep you only get from playing the same characters for years. But everyone could feel the change coming, both on and off air. Would they have lightning strike twice for a whole new set of characters? Turns out yes, because while everyone loved Vox Machina, what we were really attached to were the people making the show. A lesson Geek and Sundry learned the hard way when Critical Role broke off and did its own thing. Campaign 2 brought with it many exciting changes. A whole new continent, new conflicts and lore, and a completely new branch of magic, and most excitingly, new, darker, and morally complex characters. These weren't big, broad heroes, but broken people doing their best to heal and begrudgingly doing what's right. The danger was more amorphous and operating from the shadows. The stakes were high, and not everyone made it out, but the heroics didn't lead to global fame. I loved the journey, even if the end battle left me wanting more. But that brings us to Campaign 3. Big spoilers ahead, if you haven't done the 8.5-hour thing. I wish I could find it, but while answering a question on their old after show, Liam once said something along the lines of, you can't be an atheist in Exandria because you can see proof of the gods everywhere. And I feel like Matt heard that and said, bet. And he went home and created Ludinus. I love a villain that, as they explain the reasoning behind their seemingly hideous acts, you can't help thinking, damn, they got a point. The theme throughout the campaign of questioning where authority comes from and who gets to wield it really speaks to me. I know, big shock. The anarchist likes the story of fighting the biggest authority figures of all, the gods. But it raises so many interesting questions. Just because you created something, does it give you authority over it in perpetuity? Even parents must eventually let go of their kids to grow up and be their own selves. If you are backed up by something as powerful as a god, does it give you the right to exert your will on the world? And if you found the power to kill the gods, does that mean you have the right to push your will on others? Might supposedly makes right, after all. These are the questions this new batch of characters had to deal with, and what I found great about it is, they didn't come to a consensus on them until the last moment when they had no choice but to make a choice. Instead, they found a common ground that if this power existed, Ludinus couldn't have it, and worked from that. Then, when the time came to make this ultimate decision, they had built up enough trust in each other that, even if they didn't agree with their choice, they trusted the person enough to know they were doing what they thought was best, even if it wasn't what they would do. It's a beautiful lesson in praxis over theory, and I know a few left-wing groups that can learn that lesson. I won't break down the last marathon episode myself. You can check out a channel like Luboffin for that. But I will say the 8 hours kind of flew by. The stakes could not have felt bigger than having a boardroom meeting with all the gods. Decisions were made that have me intrigued about the future of this whole fictional world, and I can't wait to see how Exandria deals with a world without gods and literal aliens being resettled. That always goes so well here in the real world. I almost feel bad for Predathos after that natural 20 Laura rolled, forcing it into a life of starvation. But I bet some of the gods are dumb enough to think that the threat is past and will try to ascend again just to be eaten, and it might be a race to see who can do it first. As for the campaign as a whole, it took me a bit to get into it, but once I did, I was just as invested as I've always been. I love the twist on classes some players took, especially Taliesin with his magically infused barbarian. Give me more Exandrian punks! This campaign did a great job connecting all that came before and telling a story of a world and not just a group of characters. And as I said before, asking big questions about the structure and origins of that world. That all being said, I hope the next campaign is more disconnected. I don't want Critical Role to fall into the Star Wars trap of only exploring one small chunk of its history over and over. Maybe a story set far from all these places we've seen before. So no Vasselheim or Whitestone, just a whole new part of the globe like most of Campaign 2. After an Avengers Endgame level 3 campaign crossover like this, it'd be nice to get some distance from it. I'd also like to spend more time as low-level fuck-ups just getting into low-stakes yet silly scrapes. I recently watched Dimension 20 Starstruck Odyssey, and what I love about it is, even with an overarching story, they're just a gaggle of idiots most of the time, and Critical Role can use some more of that. With Campaign 3, it feels like we got right into the deep end with everyone's backstories, and we ended up with, even after 4 years, a lot of untugged threads. So I guess I'd like to see more side quests before the big bad comes calling. As for the off-screen future of Critical Role, there are also some big changes coming. For one, I'm almost positive they'll be switching systems to Daggerheart, the system they created. It just makes the most sense since they have their own system, and Hasbro's/Wizards continues to be an awful company. Once the D&D Beyond sponsorship disappeared, the fact that Wizards didn't immediately assign someone to keep that relationship healthy is one of the biggest fumbles I've seen since Jonathan Majors. But this is the company that let its relationship with the studio behind Baldur's Gate 3 dry up as well, so I'm not surprised. All that being said though, I will miss D&D if they switch. But maybe I'm just getting old and starting to fear change a little more. It's been 10 years of mostly good times, but all the things that I started watching from that time have disappeared or morphed into other things. Critical Role has been one of the few constant bright spots for me, and a lot of others, over a wild decade in the world, and I hope we have many more years ahead. Nothing lasts forever, but I'm glad it's still kicking after all these years. I'm making myself sad. Let's wrap this up. What did you think of Campaign 3? Favorite moments or characters? What do you think will come next in Critical Role land? Let's talk about it down in the comments, and as always, death to the algorithm.
Yeah.